It is often said that seeing is believing. And as we hear in today's gospel, for many people who saw Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead, it was. They saw and they believed. Some, however, ran to tell the Pharisees what they had seen. And this is where common sense seems to have failed. The chief priests and Pharisees called a meeting, and straight away one gets the impression that the good news wasn't really good news for them. Why was this? After all, as religious leaders of God's holy people, shouldn't they have been keeping fervent watch for signs that the Messiah had finally arrived? Notice that no one in the meeting appears to have denied that a miracle took place. And not just any miracle. A man who had been dead for 4 days had been raised to life. This was incontrovertible proof that God was at work. Shouldn't they have been a little more excited? Those gathered asked themselves, what action should we be taking? Rather than allow themselves to be the receivers of God's blessings, they wanted to take control. They wanted to stay in charge. If everyone believes in him, the Romans will come and destroy the holy place and our nation. Being in control, they don't want to lose their grip on power. And being in power, they have let themselves forget why they were ever entrusted with authority in the first place. A power that is unwilling to step aside so as to serve is a blind and dangerous power. When God is not given first place in our hearts, it's not that he happily then takes second place. Instead, he leaves our hearts altogether, because he cannot coexist with the idol that has replaced him. For these high priests and Pharisees, the temple had clearly become their idol, so much so that when God himself came among them, they preferred the temple to him. Sin leads to death. Before it leads to death, however, it leads to blindness, hard-heartedness, and spiritual insanity. So, when a man is raised from the dead, the reaction isn't to see and to believe, but rather to see and to seek to kill, to hear and to scheme and plot. Lent is a sacred season when we are given the precious time to go through our hearts and to cast out anything which might seek to steal first place from God. It might be ambition or lust. It might be unforgiveness or pride. We must be attentive to ensuring that, with the help of divine grace, our hearts are prevented from slipping into unfaithfulness to God, into resentment at his presence among us, into the worship of idols, into the hardness that leads to brutality and to death. Our Lady's Immaculate Heart was a perfect holy house for the divine indwelling. At the Annunciation, Our Lady's fiat was a resolute and joyful yes to God and no to self. It was a yes to true worship and adoration of our Creator, and a resounding no to all things adulterous and idolatrous. Our Lady's fiat welcomed God to reign, as he had always done, but not only in her outward things, but also in her most interior self. Our Lady's fiat was an infinite rejection of Satan and of all his works and of all his empty promises. Mary, Mother of God, and our most loving Mother, holds out to us today the gift of her fiat. She wants us to utter our own fiat, joyfully and wholeheartedly, with her and through her, so that we may see and believe ever more in her divine Son, and in believing that we may come to eternal life in him.